now offering consultation services through Faithfully Engaged. If you're struggling finding a church, dealing with a destructive habit such as pornography, trying to find a way to homeschool your kids but don't know where to start, come check me out. Go to faithfullyengaged.com/consulting to learn more information and to see how we can get started. Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Faithfully Engaged. Today, my guest name is Saisha. So, Saisha, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience today and just kind of say a little bit about yourself?
For sure. So, my name is Sasha. Like you said, I'm a licensed professional counselor and a licensed alcohol and drug counselor here in the state of Oklahoma. And I run a remote coaching business where I help women to just look and feel their best from their mind and their body. So, focus on all things mindset, nutrition, fitness. We just don't leave anything unturned. I am a mom to two super busy kiddos. I have a son that just turned 3 and he is autistic, and I have a 7-month old. And so that really sparked even my desire and calling to share more of our story and our struggles of just having kids that are super busy and going through the special needs world. So I actually have a podcast that I launched here recently, and it's called The Mob Mentality. So it's just all for moms of busy babies that just need somewhere to get together and to collaborate and feel like you have some support.
Mhm. I love that. I love pretty much all the things that you said there. I do want to start off with because I've had other counselors on the show before.
Mhm.
As I'm a very much like Saisha, a licensed professional counselor in Oklahoma as well. So tell me just a little bit about your journey. What initially led you into counseling, and yeah, just kind of tell me your counseling journey there.
For sure. So I actually had no idea that I would become a counselor when I started school. It wasn't until I actually started my graduate program. I went to OU and I had a professor that he really became a mentor, and he kind of guided me along the lines. At OU, there's a master's in human relations, and then it kind of takes a turn into a counseling path. And he had owned private practice, psychiatry, and everything. And he actually pushed me in that direction and thought it would be something that I'd be really great at. And it came naturally, just being able to talk and connect with other people. And then just from my own like personal experiences as far as like upbringing, and then even myself and the kind of the chaos, the winds and turns of our own lives. I felt a passion just to really dig in and help people struggling with addiction. And so overcoming a lot of the mental aspect and the behaviors and stuff that come along with that. So that became a passion of mine. So that's really what guided me into the counseling world. And from there, just things, we kind of evolve and we become our own person along that professional path. And that's what led me now into even coaching.
Yeah, I want to get into the coaching aspect a little bit more
Yeah.
in just a second, but I am curious, especially with you doing podcasting. Again, I don't know. There's not a lot that have quite our intersection of being both a counselor and a podcast host. That's just a fairly
Mhm.
limited pool. And for you, when you're doing podcasting, do you see kind of your counseling skills, kind of those attending skills and things like that? Does that tend to come out for you when you are doing a podcast?
Yes, I think it just even when you do podcasts and even coaching, like I do a lot of remote coaching. Counseling in the past was all just very much, sitting in an office and face to face. And it's actually pretty incredible the amount of cues and just like the nonverbals and the tonality and everything that I feel like is so much of our skill set as counselors that still even just carries over with you into podcasting and doing remote interviews and talking with people. So I feel like that's a skill set I use constantly, and it's been really valuable still.
And part of why I asked that is I've been doing my podcast for just this year. I mean, it's only been like 4 or 5 months or something.
Yeah.
And I have people ask all the time, like, "Oh, how did you do that? Like, how do you ask these questions?" I'm like, I just take my day job, and this is way easier than my day job. Like this, it's
Right. It's
pretty
fun.
simple. So yeah, I think it really is a valuable asset that we tend to not think about it very much because that's when you're a counselor, it's just kind of what you do. But
Mhm.
most people don't have that. Most people don't think quite the same way that we do, and it can be applied in other ways, like podcasting, and then also jumping into your coaching side of things.
Mhm.
This is something that when we initially connected, I was really interested in, because I'm really at this phase in my career where it's like, okay, I still want to do the typical counselor thing, but I want to branch out a little bit. I don't want to
Mhm.
just do the same thing for 30 years and retire, whatever. So
Yeah.
coaching really, really interests me. So tell a little bit more of just that journey into the coaching world. How has that worked
Mhm.
out for you?
For sure. So we actually owned a brick and mortar gym in Edmond, Oklahoma, and we had people, come into the gym and they're wanting to get healthy and lose weight. It's kind of, why we all walk into the gym, our motivation in the first place, right? And people would get stuck and they wouldn't be losing the weight or have the progress that they wanted to have. Well, it's really what's going on the other 23 hours of the day that you're not in the gym that really matter most.
Mhm.
And so I actually had people coming to me and I began coaching remotely even with them to dig into more things of, what does your home life look like? How do you manage stress? How's work? How's your nutrition? And that kind of like put me in that realm of being able to coach them to get better results in the gym. And when all the COVID and everything hit, I actually was kind of placed with an ultimatum with my job. And I was actually traveling a lot, and they were going to close down my home office. I had just had my son, and I was like, this doesn't work, for me right now. And I had almost transitioned more into an administrative role along with counseling. And my partner was actually super supportive and he had wanted me to leave and do my own coaching thing for quite a while. And so it just gave me that permission to do it. It was like, now's the time. Take the leap of faith, see what happens. And it was super scary, but it really allowed me to be more authentically, I feel like, even who I am. It's like allowing me to apply that skill set that I have as a counselor, but do it in my own personal way that doesn't have all these, ethical guidelines that we're trying to follow and these limitations and rules. It's like, okay, this is how I can best help you. This is how I can serve you. I can share my own experiences with you and guide you along that process. And that's what led me to where I'm at today. And it's been pretty fantastic.
It's so interesting that you bring up COVID and that no matter who you are, you're going to
Mhm.
remember that, especially 2020, but really through like 2022, it really seems like this year it's
Yeah.
when things have been somewhat normal, although there's still, you know, I think there'll always be some repercussions from that time frame. But
Hmm.
regardless, it's generally looked at as a negative. And don't get me wrong, like overall, yeah, it's bad. Like people died and things shut down. Like I'm not saying that that's good,
Yeah.
um, but what I will say is story like yours and honestly with mine, I had some job things that really um turned around during that time frame. And eventually I started working for another place remotely and now out all on my own. And honestly, without that kind of COVID precipice, probably wouldn't have
Hmm.
happened. And I think that's what's so special about your story, what you're sharing there, is you turned a admittedly rough situation and
Hmm.
let's use this as motivation to do something good. Let's not just sit in the badness and kind of mope and feel sorry for ourselves. Like let's challenge ourselves to do something. And I think that probably stands as motivation when you're talking with your clients too, of helping motivate them
Hmm.
as well.
I can definitely speak on it's like, the fear and how scary it is to just go through uncertainty. And I think that's what stops a lot of us from making any type of change
Mm.
that we want to see is, we're fearful, we're scared, we're uncomfortable. And we just always put out there, it's like the what ifs. There are always going to be the what ifs. And when I was even faced with that situation, I was like, there are certain parts of my character that I'm like, no matter what crazy pandemic hits us or, what life throws our way, I'm like, nothing's going to steal away those parts of your own personal strengths and your character that you have developed. And that's what I had to fall back on. I was like, okay, I can do hard things. If I'm going to set up my mind to do something, like it's going to work out, things are going to be just fine. Instead of like, oh my gosh, I have a new baby. What if I can't put food on the table? I'm like, that was not even an option. I was like, all right, if this is the direction I'm going to go, we're going to do our damn well best that we can at this. And we're going to take it for what it is. And I think just more people need to realize it's like you have so much inner strength. You just need to pull it out.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it is that mentality of, yeah, I'm going to make it happen. And
Hmm.
that's something, and I'm kind of just curious on your thoughts on this, that
Hmm.
I've been thinking through this of just in my time frame of being a counselor. I graduated from grad school in 2013. So
Okay.
roughly a decade post post graduation. Actually,
Hmm.
almost exactly a decade. Now that I think about it.
You made
But
it a decade in.
that's right. That's
A
right.
lot of people are already burnt out by this
That
point. So you're
well,
doing pretty good.
that's exactly right. No doubt about
Hmm.
it. Uh, Something I've seen even in that 10 years is more of a shift into being open about talking about mental health, openly embracing, like, yes, I'm struggling with anxiety or depression or whatever it may
Hmm.
be. And don't get me wrong, overall, that's a good thing. Like, I think we should
Hmm.
be comfortable talking about those things. But I think an unintended consequence of that is I've seen a lot more, and this is just anecdotal evidence of what I've seen, that a lot more excuses come along with that of, well, I can't do this because I have anxiety disorder, or
Hmm.
I'm bipolar, so there's no way I can do this. And I'm sure this hits you personal of autism diagnosis, whether that's the
Hmm.
person themselves or as a parent. Just a
Yeah.
lot of limiting factors there, some legitimate,
Right.
but often, I guess, over exaggerated. And holding yourselves back by just a diagnosis is not, it's not a good thing. And I don't think that's something
Hmm.
the profession should be pushing.
Hmm.
I'm just kind of curious of your thoughts on that, of if you felt like you've seen a similar shift, and if the kind of the psychological counseling profession, if it at times maybe unintentionally so can limit people from realizing that potential like you're talking about.
Yeah. This is such a good, juicy topic right here. And I love that somebody like in the profession is willing to have this conversation because we're supposed to be the ones that are all like, oh, yeah, this is your diagnosis, be really, supportive and empathetic and, all the good things that come along with that. And it's like we can take that diagnosis, but again, that is not something that is supposed to control
Mhm.
your entire life. And it's a piece. It's just a piece of who you are that you learn how to, in my hopes, is to help you function at the various highest level that you can with that diagnosis. And it's not meant to limit you, it's allowed to give you more freedom.
Mhm.
And so even with my son and being diagnosed as autistic, is I have came to found that I'm actually more of one of the rare ones when my kid was diagnosed, because I was like, please give me that diagnosis so then I can do what's next.
Mhm.
Like it was a stepping stone. I needed the diagnosis so then I could then get him help in other ways that he needed. And I wasn't upset by it. It didn't make me be like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my kid? He's forever going to be nonverbal or
Mhm.
labeled as autistic or different. I'm like, how are we going to get him to talk? How
Mhm.
are we going to help develop social skills? How are we going to make him productive and disciplined and adventurous and all these good things? And I was having a conversation with a client that I actually coached in the past, and she has 4 boys, and we were talking about this very topic of how many kids now even will come to you, and it's great that they have this awareness, but they're like, Well, I'm feeling really anxious today, and I'm very depressed. And the words that come almost from counseling and from therapy that they're applying and using, but they're using it as some type of limitation,
Mm.
like you said, of a reason why they cannot do certain things. And I think that's really sad.
I agree. I agree completely. I'm that's something again in kind of my own I don't know, professional journey or whatever that
Hmm.
yeah, there is kind of that I'm can't kind of blanking on the terms. Kind of like in with police officers, kind of that thin blue line, you kind of hear that of everyone that's on my side, like even if they did something wrong, like we're not going to say about it because we're on this together. That's
Hmm.
not the best example, but counselors kind of have a similar thing of like mental health is important, and that's true. And we need to really push mental health as important, and again, some truth to that. So
Hmm.
therefore, we don't criticize anything mental health wise. And I I don't think that's how you grow. Um, every profession, every person has flaws, and we don't grow by just hiding them. Like we need to talk about them and actually have debate. And if I'm wrong, if you're wrong, then so be
Hmm.
it. Like let's prove it. But you
Hmm.
don't prove it by just having silence and not talking about things. I don't think that's good for the discussion at all.
Right. Or even just throwing your hands up and instead of being like, well, I'm bipolar, so that means I can't be productive, or I'm bipolar, so that means that I can't, manage my emotional state. Like, you can, if you want to, and
Yes.
you want to learn how to do that. And you said so many people now are just like taking that diagnosis, and it doesn't give you a pass, I don't feel like, to just be like, that's your label, that's it. Like, this is your opportunity, not your pass to just stay complacent.
A- Absolutely. And that's something that again, I think the counseling profession as a whole can really improve on is how are we empowering our clients?
Hmm.
Somebody that has had a traumatic past. I've had many clients that have had traumatic past. And sure, there's that empathy part of like, yeah, that's horrible. I'm sorry that happened to
Yeah.
you. But we don't stay there. Like
Hmm.
you were abused as a child, that doesn't give you a right to just act like a jerk to everybody. It
Hmm.
gives you an explanation, but let's not stay there. You're not a child anymore. You're an adult. Let's learn. Let's grow.
Yeah.
Instead of that kind of that victim mentality of essentially we're telling our clients there that you you're done. You can't do anything with your life.
Yeah.
I know that's not the intention, but there's clearly where there's smoke there's fire, and there's enough of these situations, especially with kiddos,
Hmm.
that is sad. We don't need to be limiting potential because they're anxious. Okay, like you're anxious,
Hmm.
but let's work through it anyways. That's bravery, that's courageousness. um
Yes.
yeah, I'm glad to hear that you've kind of had some similar thoughts on this as
Hmm.
well.
I mean, we can even tie it into, it's just like overall weight loss, or, our genetics. And so many people just are willing to throw their hands up, sit and almost take on that victim mentality. It's like, well, I come from a family of heart disease, or I come from a family of people that are diabetic. So that just automatically means that you're going to have heart disease and diabetes and be obese. And that's not the case. There's
Mhm.
so many things that you can do to actually take care of yourself and to change that line of things. And you don't have to be one of those people that are just in your family that's somebody else that is struggling with diabetes. Most of that's completely controllable.
Along those lines, and this ties into everything that we've talked about. Um, for those of you that have not heard this term, I'm not saying this to be disparaging. It's just legitimately the term of the fat acceptance movement that's really gained a lot of steam here recently. And just to kind of tie in the listeners to this, essentially the fat acceptance movement, at its core is saying that we don't need to be hateful towards people that are overweight or whatever. Which again, similar theme. That's true. We shouldn't just be making fun of fat people just for that. Like that's mean.
Hmm.
Um, But it it gets into that acceptance part that we need to accept that not only is that okay for them, but we also see even on magazine covers and all sorts of media things that this is healthy. That was a legitimate like front magazine. I don't remember what the magazine was, but a
Yeah.
very, very overweight woman that, and it said this is healthy. And again, not trying to be mean, but that's not healthy.
Yeah.
It's just not. So what's been kind of your experience both in the counseling world and then even just in your coaching uh profession
Yeah.
of just that fat acceptance type of movement?
Oh, that was, you got some good topics here because like I like that a lot too. And you're right. Like this is where I think coaching allows me to be just so much more authentically like who I am. And it's not healthy. And I think it's okay for us to actually have our own opinions as well. And as counselors, I feel like we're supposed to have a certain opinion and the right opinion that is very kind and accepting. And it's like, I feel like I'm a very kind, accepting person, but I do not want to be accepting of your unhealthy habits and your lifestyle that I know you can make better for yourself and overall improve your quality of life. And then what's so important to me is help improve the quality of life of your kids and your family. And I'm like, I was thinking to myself yesterday, I was like, why do I do what I do? Why do I make sure that I get into the gym and take care of myself and, teach my kids healthy habits? And I'm like, I don't want to leave my kids motherless.
Mhm.
Like, if some horrible accident happened that I have no control over, like, that's the way it's supposed to be. But if it's something that I have control over, I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that I'm around as long as I am and I'm making these beautiful memories with my kids and they have really happy memories with me. And those happy memories in my mind don't consist on me sitting off on the sideline.
Absolutely. And again, it's going back into that control. There are things that are beyond your control. You get into that bad car wreck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's probably beyond your control there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, most of the obesity type of diseases are
Yeah.
preventable. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's wonderful work that you're doing to try to inject like, no, you can do this. And again, kind of in that counseling psychological profession, I think that's what's so just so damaging that's not that can it can be called controversial. That no, like it's actually healthier to just eat whatever you want or whatever. Like you can say that, but there's mountains of evidence to show that like you have an extremely high BMI or whatever, like it's bad.
Yeah.
It's that's not controversial. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I this is part of what I tie this to of my own counseling practice and just how I try to operate things as a whole. I value truth. And ultimately, I've kind of had this decision, in COVID and just doing all of my own things is if me speaking truth in appropriate ways and loving ways, if that gets
Mm-hmm.
me in trouble, then so be it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to integrity truth matters more than a job or whatever because I can
Yeah.
find another job, I can do something else, but I can't get that integrity back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not worth it for me. And
Yeah.
the great thing about it is and I hope encouraging for anybody else that's listening that's maybe not a counselor or whatever, when you start challenging a little bit, you start speaking truth a little bit, you and I, we didn't even have this type of conversation planned, but it
Oh.
attracts people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Truth is very attractive, and you will gain people on your side. So yeah, you might get enemies, you might get people that
Mm-hmm.
really dislike you, but you'll also get people on your side, and it's just worth it. It's worth it to seek truth. It
Mm-hmm.
time and time again, it'll prove you right.
That's a powerful stand that you take, especially because I know how hard that can be from a counselor standpoint. Like I said, is like we have these boards that we have to answer to, and we've worked so hard to gain our licenses. It's like, well, there's a lot of work that goes into
Mhm.
that, a lot of school, a lot of work after the fact that nobody sees or knows. And being able to risk that for yourself was like, okay, I'm not going to put myself in a position to be untruthful or to not hold myself up to a high level of integrity. Said, I really respect that in you as a professional. And I'm sure your clients do as well, because that is powerful.
And that's that other side of it too. And honestly, some of this helps the fact that I'm in Oklahoma, although that does not completely protect me by any means. But as opposed to some other states have taken much harder stances on all sorts of different things, essentially controlling what counselors can and can't say in the counselor room, which is insanely awful.
Hmm.
So that's somewhat of the protection, although again, that's I'm not naive. I know that's not a full protection.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is challenging that ethically, that I don't go out of my way to say, oh, all my clients, you have to have this opinion or you have to have that opinion. No,
Yeah.
I'm not in the business of that. But the ones that are seeking um true feedback or seeking like, hey, like I have this family member that's struggling with this, what do you think about it? And speaking truth, not even just my opinion, but truth, that's
Hmm.
extremely attractive, not just to other professionals but to the clients, that they're
Hmm.
like, oh wow, like I haven't heard that from a counselor before or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, if that strips me of a license by providing better care, then again, so be it. And that's why I'm so
Yeah.
attracted to what you're doing. And there is a little bit of strategy in what I'm doing too. That's part of why I have this podcast and um, I have my own private practice as well.
Hmm.
That's cash only. I'm trying to
Yeah.
keep as few hands out of the cookie jar as possible. And
Yeah.
there's some strategy there that should I lose my license, what I'm doing right now is building up enough of an audience and to where I can switch into coaching a lot easier than
Yeah.
just, oh crap, I don't know what to do. So
Yeah.
there is planning, just like I'm sure you had done as well. You didn't just like flip the switch one day. That your thoughts had been going there for quite some time.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a lot easier to be bolder when you are actively working out ahead. Living a
Yeah.
life of fear, you're not going to be very bold that
Hmm.
way.
I wish I would have been more bold. Yes, that even in the way that you're doing things, like having this strategy, I think is absolutely fantastic. And it's like that reach and collaborating with other people, because I felt like at the time it's like I didn't know anybody else that was in my profession and also kind of teetering on that line. And it almost seemed, and I even had a lot of family and people that still was like, so when are you going to go back to this, like when are you going to go back to counseling?
Mhm.
Because they're like, that's just crazy that you spent all this money on school and went through all these things and did all of that, and then you're just going to leave it behind. I'm like, I didn't leave it behind.
Mhm.
All the skill set and everything comes with me.
Sure.
And I think that's what makes me good at what I'm able to do and help on a different level. But like I said, this is just gives me so much more freedom to
Mhm.
do things the way that I want to do them, and said not have certain everybody's hands in the cookie jar of this is the way that it has to go. So yes, like I said, I give all tons of props of just like I said, being bold, being forward thinking, because I think a lot of people could benefit from more people that do have this expertise, do have this knowledge base, but then be able to help in so many other broader ways will tremendously impact our population.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it's about. And I know for you and for even some of the counselors that I disagree with on like everything, um, they came in to try to help people. I do truly believe that. Um, the people that are in the psychology profession by and large are very empathetic and do care about people. I tried to paint people that I disagree with in a good light in that way because again, I legitimately do believe it. Again,
Hmm.
that being said, though, I'm in that for that same reason, and I think there's a lot of damaging things.
Hmm.
And and I hate to see this, but I can't disagree with it too much. I don't know if you had seen any of this recently, but Matt Walsh, which is pretty big, like conservative commentator. I don't even listen to his stuff most of the time, but he had quite a few comments here recently about therapy. And with that, he was essentially saying like, hey, most of what you do in therapy, like you don't really need to go. Like, is there a lot of evidence that therapy is even helpful? And I certainly disagreed with a lot of what he was saying. But
Mhm.
then again, I sit back and like probably what he sees in the media or whatever. It's like I can't really disagree with a lot of what he's saying too. And that's sad. Like that's my profession. I
Mhm.
shouldn't have like negative views towards it.
Yeah.
So again, that's another reason of trying to be a little bit bolder. And there's a minority, don't get me wrong, but a growing minority of counselors that some are conservative, some are not, but are just saying, hey, I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
I disagree with this, or at least just asking questions.
Mhm.
And I see a lot of conflict in the future, but I think it's good. I think it's good that there's
Yeah.
this remnant because I didn't know these people either. But you start saying enough of these things out loud, and that they'll find you. That they'll be
Yeah.
naysayers that'll find you for sure.
Well, and even realizing, like, I mean, told you, like, you made it a decade. Like, I mean, that's a big deal because there's so many people that are in the healthcare field just in general. And I think this, I mean, boomed and we began to see it. I mean, and all it just as bright as ever whenever COVID hit, that there are so many professionals in the healthcare field, counselors that are just completely burnt out, stressed
Yeah.
out, and they are not taking care of themselves. I
Yep.
mean, we know we could look around a room of counselors and there's a lot of people that are overweight, unhealthy, stressed out to the max, like full of complaints. And that is no way to live. And it's like even being in the healthcare field, like I do believe that it's our job as a therapist. It's like we have to be well enough to help the
Mhm.
people that are coming to us that are sick.
Yes. No, yeah,
It's like
you're exactly
isolating
right.
the sick is not going to work.
No, I think you're exactly right. And we see this too, not not just counseling, but with doctors that my goodness, like
Yeah.
talk about getting rest and exercise and all that stuff while they just work 20 straight hours in the hospital. Like that doesn't make sense. That you're not
Right.
modeling that behavior. And we certainly don't have time to get into all of this, but a lot of that is just the structure of particularly
Hmm.
insurance payments and things like that. That's again part of why my private practice is cash only is there's just so much red tape and rules and
Hmm.
this is all over the place. Um,
Yep.
that and then they don't even end up paying you that much. Like
Right. Oh.
it's an awful system.
Mhm.
And I've plugged this before on a different podcast, but my wife and I and my kids too, we are part of something that's called a direct primary care. Have you heard of that before?
Yes, I have.
Okay. I, I love it. I love everything about it. It's a cash only practice. It kind of works like Netflix. You have a subscription. Um,
Mhm.
but like I'll give you kind of a unflattering story of myself. I guess I had a wart on my toe, and one of those things where, like, if I was still on my insurance, where like, yeah, I know I probably should remove, but let me just go get over the counter stuff and do it myself. I don't want to
Mhm.
pay for a doctor's visit. Instead, I text my doctor, "Hey, got a wart." He says, "Can you come in tomorrow?" Yep. 5 minutes in and out the door. See you later. That's it. No
Yeah.
money was exchanged, nothing, because I already had that subscription in there. And
Mhm.
my care is so much better. It's
Yes.
ridiculously better. And insurance isn't touched at all. And I think that's a
Mhm.
massive part of it because he doesn't, the only person that works for him is his wife, who is a nurse as well.
Mhm.
Um, Otherwise, there's no front desk. There's no nothing because you don't have to do the red tape. Um, And I just love the outside the box type of thinking
Yep.
that all of healthcare is having. And even with you using counseling techniques in a like, hey, let's help you get healthier, not just mentally, but physically. It's
Hmm.
wonderful. We need that. We all know that this country and really all the West is not doing well with our health. So let's do something about
Yeah.
it. Let's think outside the box. So
Yeah.
there's so much bad that goes on, and I get it, but there's a lot of good new ideas going around too that I think is really exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that whole movement and that shift is, I mean, it's coming from people in the medical field that are like, I am tired of, insurance and companies telling me that my schedule has to be filled every 15 minutes with someone new. Like, what kind of patient care is that? And I think those doctors that are making that even transition, they're becoming a lot healthier and a lot
Hmm.
happier because they aren't stressed out to the max. And I know it can be extremely difficult and hard. And, it's like that's your means of survival and that's your job. And, being able to say no and set boundaries. But you have to be able to take a step back. And this is in whatever profession anybody
Hmm.
listening is in. Like, if you are just completely, like I said, burnt out, and I was that person that when the alarm went off in the morning, I was like, I did not want to get out of bed because I'm like, how many fires am I going to have to put out today? And it was just like this sense of just dread. I felt so heavy that I just didn't even want to get out of bed. And now it's like, I wake up and I'm ready to work and I'm like, I'm up at 4 o'clock working just because like I get to do it. It's something that I enjoy doing. And like those are your signs. Those are your
Yeah.
cues that you need to make some type of change in your life, whether it's start with your own physical health and like what you need to do in order to be less stressed out and burnt out, or look at where you need to begin to start setting those boundaries in your workplace and, open your mouth and communicate what you need because something needs to change.
Absolutely. And again, what it comes down to is you have to act. You have to do
Mhm.
something. And that might be maybe it's calling up Saisha of like, hey, I want to get back in the gym, but something's stopping me. Can you help me? Great. That could be
Yeah.
your first step. It could be I'm gonna start sleeping more. I'm gonna go walk outside more. I don't care what it is, but you have to
Right.
do something.
Hmm.
And you can't wait for the doors to just open. That I'm not going to just call some random person. Hey, do you want counseling today? Like you have to
Hmm.
call me. You have to take that first step. And again, that's something that everybody has the ability to. And as another reason why I made this podcast is there's so much material out there about what all's going wrong, but in the end, if you're just looking at what's wrong and complaining, that's not doing you or anybody else to look good. Like find out what's wrong and then do something. Take a
Hmm.
step, and maybe you took the wrong step. So be it. Go find another one, but at least try. At least do something. So I, I think that this is wonderful. I love really the heart of what you're doing, your story, how you're impacting other people, and also just your own personal story of how you're not letting a difficult diagnosis for many parents to hear, not keeping you down, and let's get my son the best help and make him the best that he
Yeah.
can be. What a wonderful story. And I'm imagining people listening to this episode probably want to get in contact with you, know more information about you and what
Yeah.
you do. So, how can they be in touch with you?
For sure. So, Instagram and YouTube are both great places. I do all of my own communication and outreach. So, if you message me, you're actually going to get me, which I think is kind of special nowadays.
Yeah,
Uh, but on Instagram, it's Sasha, it's SASHA underscore fit counselor. And then on YouTube, it's just Sasha Rogers, LPC.
perfect. And I will have all of that linked down there in the show notes so you guys can check that out. And Seisha, thanks again
Well,
so much for being on and having this needed conversation.
this was great. I enjoyed it. I'm glad. So you had some really great topics. I hope to come back.
I, absolutely. I would agree with that. So far I think I've only had one official person that has been on twice. I do have a couple more in the works, but I agree that that is an open invitation, no doubt about it.
Oh, well, thank you. I want to be one of those handful. This was great.
Yes. Okay. And thanks again for everyone that tuned in today. I really appreciate you listening in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.